We are going to be looking at the tangent function. This is from 7.1.7, and right now I have the resource page printed out with the solutions. So there's just a couple more things that I wanted to talk about to make sure you guys fully understand tangent. So clearly we can see that this looks way different from sine and cosine. One of the biggest differences is that tangent has asymptotes, vertical asymptotes, where sine and cosine do not. So, and obviously their domain and range are going to be different, so we're going to go ahead and talk about that. So domain for sine and cosine is all real numbers, and domain for tangent you could say is all real numbers, but then you also have to say except x can equal certain values, and obviously those values are the vertical asymptotes. So we can see it's pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 5 pi over 2, and it'll keep going. So another way of doing that is by saying x can equal pi over 2 plus pi n, which just means increments of pi. All right, looking at the range, when we think of sine and cosine, we know the range is restricted. In other words, it's between two values. So when thinking about the parent function, the sine and cosine graphs have a range of -1 to 1. But the range of a tangent graph is actually all real numbers, so it will continue going up and down forever. And now we're going to talk about the x and y intercepts. So the x-intercept, and again, this is all for the parent function, so obviously once we start transformations, things will slightly change. So the x-intercepts we can see right here are multiples of pi. So one way we can do that, we can write out multiples of pi, or we could say something like 0 plus pi n, comma 0. I would like to think that that's probably the easiest. And then for, or you could just say really pi n, it doesn't really matter. And then for the y-intercept, we can see that the y-intercept is just 0, 0. All right, so the other thing is the asymptotes, but really the asymptotes are what we already said in our domain. It's pi over 2 plus pi n. Another super important thing about tangent that you need to know, sorry about that, is tangent is y over x, which is really like the slope. So when we think of this triangle in our unit circle, so let's say I have my unit circle and here's my circle. So this is y and this is x. When you think of that, tangent is y over x, or you can say it is sine over cosine, which really means it's actually the slope of that triangle or of that angle. So going back to the unit circle, if I were to ask you to find, let's say, the tangent of 90 degrees, it would be y over x right here. So then that would be 1 divided by 0, which is undefined. So tangent is actually undefined at 90 degrees and 270 degrees because those are both vertical lines, and we know that vertical lines have an undefined slope. Another example of tangent would be if I asked you to find the tangent of 135 degrees. So right here, so we would do y over x, which is root 2 over 2, divided by negative root 2 over 2, which ends up being just -1. So that is pretty much what I would like you guys to know about tangent. Again, in summarizing, you would need to know that tangent is different from cosine and sine in that it has vertical asymptotes. You need to know that the range for tangent is all real numbers versus the domain for sine and cosine is all real numbers. And then obviously the domain is restricted in tangent. And then need to know that it is y over x or sine over cosine, which is essentially the slope. Okay, that is tangent for you.